back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. I don't know how else to put this, but something happened in West Virginia. We'll just start with that and let my guest explain the rest. But it is something that the entire country should be paying attention to because it kind of points us in a direction I would say a lot of people listening to this program do not want to go. Joining us once again is Ixya Vega. Ixya is, among other things, a member of the Morgantown City Council. She's a community organizer for Planned Parenthood and Votes South Atlantic. I believe that's all one name. Planned Parenthood Votes South Atlantic. And she is, of course, as a city council member in Montgomery, a resident of West Virginia. She joins us once again now. So first of all, Ixya, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. It's great to be back.
Well, it's great to see you again. So that event that I didn't name, tell us about it.
Yeah, so the last time that I was here and that we had a conversation, it was because West Virginia representatives decided to put an abortion ban on the agenda. We rallied, and using people power, we were able to stop them for a while. Unfortunately, we had interim session, I believe, about 2 weeks ago. And during that interim session, we were told that we were only going to be putting folks onto a committee to be talking about the abortion ban. But they quickly ended up putting the abortion ban on the agenda. The abortion ban did pass, and the governor did sign the abortion ban into place. He very casually brought it up. There was no announcement, no opportunity for the public to say its piece. So abortion is now illegal in the state of West Virginia.
Abortion, now let's just be clear. Abortion is illegal after a certain point, after it's illegal for somebody, everybody. Just what are the outlines of this draconian law?
Yeah, so there's a couple exceptions to this ban. Specifically for rape and incest, this bill would allow survivors of sexual assault to obtain an abortion only in two conditions. One, or only if they do two things. One, if they obtain an abortion in the first 8 weeks. This is already difficult, as in some folks at 8 weeks don't even know that they are pregnant. Right. And some folks have, periods that aren't always on schedule. So this impacts a lot of folks. And two, they have to file a police report 48 hours before their said abortion. Again, this is another way that keeps the majority of survivors from accessing care, and it further traumatizes sexual assault victims, and further proves that the state does not want to protect survivors. It wants to control bodies. And we also know that a lot of people don't report their sexual assaults. It could be years before they can even really come to terms with what's happened. So this isn't realistic for the state of West Virginia. It isn't realistic for a lot of folks who are survivors. If the fetus has a fatal abnormality, or if the mother's or person who is carrying's life is at risk, that is also an exception, but there's no exception for mental health or general health of the person giving birth.
So let's go through. I just want to make sure our audience absolutely understands this. So yeah. Let's go through a couple examples. So a woman gets pregnant, perhaps as a result of any sort of consensual encounter. She can't get an abortion at all?
No.
Okay. That's number one. At any age?
At any age.
Okay. If a child is raped and becomes pregnant, the child can get an abortion, but only after going back to the police station notifying the police 48 hours in advance that they plan to get an abortion. Is that also correct?
That is correct, yes. So a child would have to file a police report to be able to obtain an abortion.
See, I ask these questions, and of course it's true for someone whose health is endangered by the pregnancy, or an adult who was raped. The reason why I ask these questions, as grim as they are, Ixya, is because although you well know, I'm trying to convey to the audience just how horrific this is. Now, we know from talking to rape survivors, for example, how traumatic reporting a rape can be. And as you point out, sometimes it takes them a while to emotionally process the rape before they even report it. If that's the case, then they've run out their clock on the ability to get an abortion, because 8 weeks is a very short period of time. If they file a police report for the rape, we know that can be frequently a traumatic experience, to put it mildly. Police forces, urban, rural, are not necessarily known, I'm trying to put this politely, but for their delicacy and sensitivity in handling these things a lot of the time. Sometimes they are, but very often they are not. So we might be looking at someone, a child, an adult, who has had a horrific experience, has been re-traumatized in reporting that experience to the police, and now has to go back again to say that they're pregnant and plan to get an abortion, which is a third trauma, and that's assuming they even believe them, right? Am I right so far?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And specifically when I think of this type of ban and these exceptions, quote unquote, I think of young children specifically who are in a dangerous household where possibly that's where their assault is continuously happening. So
Right.
they have to file a police report against a possible family member, and that could be completely unsafe for them. Depending on what route the police decides to take it at, that child could remain in that home with that dangerous parent or family member and suffer even more abuse for years to come.
And let's be clear. I think that, in my mind anyway, and of course, correct me if I'm being unfair to our Republican friends, in scare quote here, or anyone who voted for this thing, it seems to me that the intent here is to torment rape victims and people whose lives are in danger from pregnancy. I think the intent appears to be to make it virtually impossible to avoid avoid carrying their pregnancy to term, to get an abortion. And I think my take is that there's a strong element of sadism in the way this is structured. You've been through a horrific experience, or your life is in danger. Well, you haven't seen nothing yet, because you better know almost, you can't know until it's almost too late. And then if by chance you do know, we're going to make sure you're very aware that you have to go through the traumatic experience of reporting it to the police, what you plan to do, knowing you will be watched, scrutinized, and potentially brought up on charges if somebody decides this was not there was no legitimate reason for the abortion, quote unquote, legitimate under their law. So it seems to me this is sadistic and of the worst order. Am I being unkind to our Republican friends?
I think you're being the perfect amount of kind, if anything, too kind. This is an evil ban that they've been putting through. And if it was up to majority of the GOP that was in the room, there would be absolutely no exceptions, even for rape or incest, which is the disheartening part. That's why we continue to say that it's not about supporting victims, because we are not giving victims the support that they need, or survivors the support that they need. We're adding even more barriers, and we're adding more reasons for them to be re-traumatized from what's already happened.
So, yes, I mean, this seems to me almost like a trauma inducement law, right? This seems to be, besides trying to prevent as a practical matter, people from getting abortions. Number one, it's just trying to prevent them by pretending that they've created these exceptions, making it almost impossible. Two, I mean, the level of sadism kind of just blows me away. It shouldn't by now, because I should know what we're up against. I guess I have to ask you this, Ixya, what kind of arguments did people use in the deliberations over this to say, oh, we're doing a good thing here? What kind of justifications do people give for this?
Unfortunately, a lot of the justifications were religious justifications.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these folks refuse to separate the church and the state, even though that's what the Constitution of the United States says. So during their arguments, they just kept saying, we are saving thousands of little lives instead of saving the lives of people and women who are already members of society that have been contributing to this world for years. And it seems that they were putting their personal religious beliefs in the forefront of this argument.
And the bizarre part about that, for me, I'm a big supporter of religious freedom, but although I was raised in one religion, I was also sent away to live with Southern Baptist relatives many, many, many years ago. And the thing about, and these are like, we're talking about evangelicals, right? And the thing about evangelicals then is they didn't really talk about abortion. The word abortion isn't in the Bible. It isn't, Jesus never said thou shalt not. It wasn't on the radar. As you know, Ixya, this is something that was developed over the last 50 years or so as a kind of wedge issue. And to me, it seems they're not only making their religion a state religion, they're making their version of their religion a state religion. So if you're another kind of Christian, you're also dealt out of this, right?
Exactly, yeah. And we heard from many folks who practice Judaism and folks who practice Islam. And those laws in their religious beliefs state that they should be able to access abortions, especially if it has to do with the person who's carrying life. So I 100% agree with your statement that the state is trying to force their version of Christianity and their version of religion on the rest of the folks. Before we start any session, they start off with a prayer, which automatically isolates folks who are possibly religious, but don't necessarily practice that version of Christianity and pray that to that God. So it's definitely limiting to not only folks who are a different version of Christian in the state of West Virginia, but a different religion completely.
Right, or no religion, because people in this country have a right to have no religion.
Exactly.
And so I guess what I'm struggling with a million things I'm struggling about. It's horrible, Ixya. But one of the things I'm struggling with is that I don't know specifically for West Virginia, but I know for the polls in general, people by significant majorities support a woman's right to choose, or anybody's right to choose what to do with their bodies, including regarding abortion. So I mean, there may be some difference in that among whether it's how late in the term or whatever, but there's generally a majority that feels this way. I don't know the views in West Virginia specifically, but it seems to me there must be an awful lot of West Virginians who are very unhappy about this. Are there?
Yeah. So what the GOP has done a really great job of doing is that they've been able to control the narrative. West Virginians are anti-abortion, but through the work that we've done with Planned Parenthood and our other partner organizations, we've taken time throughout the years to knock on doors, have conversations with real people in rural parts of the state. And what we've learned is that West Virginians, more than anything, value privacy, value the ability to make a decision for themselves, especially for their families. Having the government in the bedroom and having the government in your doctor's appointments is not something that West Virginians value. Unfortunately, the GOP has been the loudest voice in this. The anti-abortion folks have always been very vocal, and it's taken a while for pro-abortion folks in West Virginia, I think, to wake up a little bit to the reality of what's happening. But I can tell you right now that folks are awake. And even the most conservative folks that you would think would be anti-abortion are pro-abortion, because they're pro making decisions for yourself. They're pro bodily autonomy. And that's the disheartening part, is that it's a veil that we have to lift up.
Well, I want to focus on that for a second, Ixya, because you brought up what to me is a really important point, and the point is this: that that you have to, when you're an organizer for reproductive rights, and as well as a city council member, when you're organizing, basic principle is, you understand what people's values are, and you try to speak to those in different communities. It seems to you just said, and it's always been my impression of West Virginians, that there's a strong belief in kind of keeping the state out of your lives. So, I may feel different. I do feel differently in many ways, but in terms of working with that as an organizing factor, right? In what ways can we talk a little bit about in what ways this law is going to invade the lives of West Virginians? In what ways are they going to be policed, spied on, patrolled on, potentially arrested? In what ways is their privacy being invaded, their autonomy being invaded? Can we just talk about, we've touched on a couple of those things, but can we just focus on that for a minute?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the biggest examples and things that people that I've had conversations with are the most terrified about is simple communication. Being able to communicate about plans, being able to communicate about ideas through Facebook Messenger or through text messages has we've quickly learned that we are not safe doing that in those spaces. I can't remember specifically what state it was, but recently a mother tried to get her daughter abortion pills and was messaging somebody on Facebook. The FBI or the police, I believe, got a hold of those Facebook messages and use that to press charges against the young person and her mother. So that is very much a reality that we could be seeing here in West Virginia. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I'm assuming that we will get there soon, that they will most likely start to restrict travel, going out of state for abortion care or any other type of health care that they can't get in the state of West Virginia. So we'll start limiting the way that folks communicate with each other. I can see us limiting streets and folks' travel. And I can see us limiting even more access to healthcare because, 1 in 3 West Virginians already suffer to get regular basic health care, and now we are adding another barrier on top of that. So we are limiting the access that folks get to their basic health care as well.
I know West Virginia's state motto in Latin. It is Montani semper liberi. Mountaineers are always free. And yet we're talking about a law that says to people in the mountains, in the hollows, in the cities, everywhere else, we're watching, right? This is a big brother law, to use that terminology. So, have people picked up on that at all? You mentioned the one case of the woman with her, the mother with her communications, but have people picked up on that piece of that they, that their mail could be searched for abortion-inducing drugs, that their emails could be, all of the stuff we're talking about now. Are people, or are you guys planning to communicate that to people, or?
Yeah, so the difficult part with a lot of this work is that we are a big state, and we are a rural state. Internet access isn't great in a lot of parts of the
Yeah.
state, so it's sometimes very hard to communicate and share that information with folks. I'm sure that today, almost 2 weeks later or a week later, there are folks that still don't know that this ban was signed into law. So one of the responsibilities that we have as an organization and that we're still working on is making sure that we completely understand everything that this bill is saying, making sure that our partners, for example, at the ACLU of West Virginia are communicating that with us so we are able to share that information with folks. Planned Parenthood was planning for a while and doing some door-to-door knocking to talk about abortion stigma later on in the fall, but we quickly have to pivot that and start talking about what this ban actually means for folks to educate them, because I am sure that there are folks that are still having these conversations through Facebook Messenger, or trying to figure out another way to do this through the mail. But I don't think that everyone is aware that they could face criminal penalties for this now.
Now, one of the things we've heard about these laws in general is that I haven't heard specifically about West Virginia, but it's still new. Is that women who spontaneously abort or have a miscarriage could find themselves facing criminal penalties, criminal charges, could be arrested because they might question whether they genuinely had a miscarriage, whether they deliberately induced a miscarriage, what have you. Is that also a risk in West Virginia?
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely a risk. We heard people during the floor sessions talk about how people and women would lie about miscarriages to be able to have an abortion, and that could also lead to some pretty difficult decisions for a doctor and a provider. A doctor, a provider can be investigated by the police or by the state if they believe that they were unlawfully providing an abortion to somebody who quote unquote miscarried. So not only are we breaking the trust that folks have on our law system, but we are now breaking the trust that a person can have with their healthcare provider. And that should be one of the people that you should be the most honest with to make sure that you are getting the healthcare that you deserve. So yeah, so far right now, we haven't heard of anything specifically, but again, it's only been about a week. So I'm sure that those stories will start coming up fairly soon.
And West Virginia, as you mentioned, is a state where a lot of people don't have access to adequate medical care. And there are parts of West Virginia where, as in many parts of the country, where I would imagine it's difficult to recruit physicians, and therefore, that should be a major public policy goal. And yet, if you're an obstetrician gynecologist graduating medical school, let's say, and trying to decide where to practice, I would imagine you would be very reluctant to go to a state where you could conceivably face criminal penalties, whether through deliberate action or something that the police misinterpret that happens between you and one of your patients. So I imagine this could and will exacerbate access to care in West Virginia. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think one of the unfortunate parts, I think me specifically as a city councilor of a city of Morgantown, is that Morgantown houses the biggest university in the state. And we also house one of the biggest hospitals in the state, Ruby Memorial. And that is all interconnected with West Virginia University. And these are folks that this is a hospital where folks come to learn and come to study. And
Right.
we have the president of the university, Gordon Gee, talking about how he's happy about these abortion bans and how these abortion bans are good, but doesn't realize that, this could impact you as well, impact the amount of medical students that are coming to West Virginia, impact the amount of folks that are going to be staying in West Virginia. People, because they live in West Virginia, want to go to medical school. Yeah, we'll go to school here in Morgantown. We'll go to school here in West Virginia, but once we're done, we're out. And that's the opposite of what we've been trying to do as a state for a while, is to keep young people here. But adding something else like this, an abortion ban, would diminish that result.
Both as providers, and given that roughly 50% of the graduates will be capable of getting pregnant as individual human beings, it won't.
Exactly.
So what are the penalties exactly? Because have they been spelled out in the bill? Someone gets an abortion and against, quote unquote, against the rules, or a provider performs an abortion against the rules. Do we know what the penalties could be if found guilty?
I don't know the specifics on that yet. Our lobbyist, Elisa Clements, and our lobbyist, Emily Wolmerdorf, has been working hard with the ACLU to make sure that we have exactly what this means. But until we have read through everything, including all of the resolutions, I don't have a specific answer on that one. But I will say that the rumors have said, and again, these are rumors, these are not cold-hearted facts, that it could be up to 10 years of prison for folks who are illegally obtaining an abortion. But again, that is not a solid fact yet.
And let us add that the public stigma in a state like West Virginia, where so many people are anti-abortion, the public stigma of being arrested for this could affect a person's could ruin a person's life, I would think. So I guess in conclusion, you mentioned that you guys are kind of retooling to try to explain this law and the implications of this law to people. I know you're not a political organization, but is there any sense that this law will shift the political dynamic in any way, by whether, it doesn't matter which party, by promoting, alternative voices? At least, I mean, you're in Morgantown. There are other, urban areas within West Virginia. There are more liberal, or whatever you want to call it, left-leaning. Whether it's there or elsewhere, I mean, is there any chance that there's going to be, whether it's political campaign or communications campaign or whatever it is, to try to help people understand? Because to me, what we're dealing with is not religion at this point. We're dealing with something else. We're dealing with theocracy now, and that's un-American to me. So I'm just wondering if there are any long-term thoughts, plans, implications about this.
Yeah, organizationally wise, we understand that to be able to change public opinion about abortion, we need to continue to be talking about abortion, talk about abortion stigma, how it shows up in our regular lives, in the media, and in politics. So now going over a little bit to the sense of politics, I really do think that this will wake a lot of people up. I have seen conversations of folks who are, I guess you could quote unquote say big Trump folks and very conservative, but the fact that this was made, and this was protected under federal law for such a long time, and then it was ripped away from us, I think that opened the eyes to a lot of folks that nothing is really safe anymore, and that your basic human rights can be taken away. I think specifically for West Virginians, like I said before, really value the ability to make decisions for your own bodies and your bodily autonomy, and for people in the government to kind of mind your business when it comes to, your own decision. So I definitely think that people will be looking at their representatives a little differently now and doing a bit more research to see exactly what these folks stand for. I think a lot of folks were also disheartened to hear a lot of their representatives talk about sexual assault victims and young sexual assault victims the way that they have during this entire session, and the lack of public input, giving us 40 seconds during a public portion to speak our minds, the police coming in and trying to shake up our peaceful rallies that we were having inside the Capitol, I think has really left a not so great taste in people's mouths. So I'm hoping that we can use this moment to build momentum and to educate folks on who is really representing them, and to hopefully find a better representative.
Well, I know you have to go by. I guess my last question is, even though we knew Dowd was coming, I found it traumatic, and I'm not capable of getting pregnant, but I would think that you and other activists found this traumatic. How are you guys holding up?
You know, for a lot of us, and speaking for my team specifically, the day that the leak came out that it was federally going to be taken away, we had to pull off 7 rallies that night at 7 p.m., all at the same time throughout the state. When it got removed, we had to have rallies in different cities as well. When it was put on the agenda, we put on rallies. When it was put on the agenda again, we put on rallies. And I think that a lot of organizations and a lot of folks working on this on the ground honestly haven't had a lot of time to sit with it and understand what's happening, because our responsibility has been to make sure that we're there for everybody else. So what I can tell you is that our team is definitely tired. A lot of people on the ground are emotionally tired because we've had to carry the feelings of a lot of our volunteers and a lot of people. But I will say that it makes being able to be in community with hundreds of West Virginians that, you know, we have never met before, come and show out for this, drive 3-4 hours to meet us at the Capitol, has definitely given us a little bit more of a pep in our step and has given us the motivation to keep going and to make sure that, you know, even though that the government has done this to us, we're not done fighting. We'll never give up for reproductive health care, and we'll never give up on West Virginians. So that's about all I can say for that.
Well, that's plenty, and action is the antidote for despair. So Ixya Vega, a community organizer with Planned Parenthood Votes South Atlantic. As always, thanks for all the great work, and as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and you're listening to The Zero Hour.